For decades, the Arctic had guarded its secrets with unhurrying silence. A place where storms swallow sound, where the death of winter turns metal into stone, and where anything lost is buried not for years, but for generations. Among these frozen tombs was a legend whispered across research stations and military offices. A passenger plane that vanished without a single trace. No wreckage, no beacon, no final message. Just 150 souls erased into white wilderness. But in 2016, a strange metallic shape hidden beneath 40 years of ice triggered alarm in a classified satellite scan. At first, officials dismissed it as another abandoned military structure. It wasn't. What lay beneath the ice would shake scientists, historians, and wildlife experts to their core. When the recovery team arrived there, they expected a tragedy frozen in time. What they didn't expect was evidence of life after the crash, behaviors that defied nature, patterns impossible to explain, and a diary that rewrote everything they knew about survival and about the creatures watching the alarm from the shadows. Because something had been guarding that planet. Something intelligent. Something patient. Something that had returned year after year for 4 decades. This isn't just a discovery. It was a confrontation with a mystery that blurred the line between human resilience and the instincts of the wild. And once the truth surfaced, it became clear. The Arctic didn't just freeze this story. It protested it. Jason Wright stood by the frosted window of VHS Anchorage office, staring at the endless white horizon as snowflakes drifted like falling ash. At 58, he had spent more than half VHS life studying the Alaskan wilderness, but the images scattered across VHS disk made VHS hands tremble in a way the cold never could. A military satellite had detected something an anomaly buried deep beneath the frozen crust. At first glance, it resembled a metallic curve, nothing more. But the second scan revealed edges too precise to be natural, and goals too perfect to ignore. When VHS research assistant, Sarah Chen, rushed into the room with fresh thermal readings, Jason already sensed the truth. The shape was hollow, large, and unmistakably artificial. Together they overlaid the thermal map, the radius scan, and the structural outline. A tail fin emerged slanted at a sharp 40-degree angle, its dimensions matching a single, infamous aircraft that had haunted Alaskan archives for 40 years. Sarah whispered the name as if afraid the eyes might hear it. Fly AE-17. Jason exhaled slowly. A plane that vanished on Christmas Eve 1976. 150 passengers. Not a single trace ever found. Until now. Prepare the briefing room, he said quietly. You're reopening the case. Outside, the Arctic wind howled against the wind almost as if it already knew what they were about to uncover. The briefing room at the National Science Foundation's Anchorage Division buzzed with an energy Jason hadn't felt in years. Outside, harsh Arctic winds hammered the reinforced windows, but inside, the atmosphere was tight, focused, and charged with anticipation. A large digital screen displayed the satellite images, the metallic shape, the thermal outlines, and the unmistakable profile of a long-lost tail fin. Specialists gathered around the table, whispering among themselves, their faces lit by the glow of the projected scans. Jason stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, VHS voice steady but heavy with significance. We may have just located the most important missing aircraft in the last half-century. A murmur rippled through the room. Fly AE-17. A tragedy buried beneath 40 years of ice. A wound that had never fully healed. At the far end of the table sat Gr. Yelena Martinez, a word authority on Alaskan wildlife behavior. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and known for her uncanny instincts in the field, she had been flown in overnight. If anyone understood the Arctic's hidden dangers, it was her. Sarah distributed folders filled with preliminary data thermal readings, Ichijong city maps, and the projected dig radius. The anomaly lies 80 miles northeast of Anchorage, she explained. Temperatures have reached negative 40. Wind speeds are unpredictable. The ice formations in this region, unusual. Yelena leaned forward. Unusual how? Sarah tapped the screen. These patterns don't follow natural glacial movement. They appear deliberated. Jerome fell silent. Jason stepped in. You're not making assumptions. But the terrain around the anomaly behaves differently, almost as if it's been disturbed repeatedly over decades. Yelena frowned. Disturbed by what? Weather doesn't repeat patterns like that. Z, Jason said. Is one reason we need you touch. The team reviewed the logistics transport vehicles, thermal drilling units, ground penetrating radar, and survival gear for a Tomand expedition. The scale was massive, but the mystery demanded it. When Tom Harrison entered the room, the ice pilot called out of some retirement for this mission. Rugged, yet heroin, and respected by every pilot in Alaska, Tom brought a presence that quieted the room instantly. He dropped Fitch's not-severed gloves on the table. If we've flown over that region more times than I can count, he said. Whatever's out there, it doesn't want to be found. I remember the search for AE-17. And my father was on the rescue team. He always said the storm that night behaved like it was a lifetime. The room grew colder, despite the heaters humming along the walls. Jason cleared each's throat. We deploy in 7 days. Weather gives us a narrow window. Once you're in, we stay until we find answers or until the ice forces us out. As the meeting dissolved, Yelena approached Jason, her expression thoughtful. You said the ice patterns looked deliberate, she said quietly. You aren't tinkt. Jason glanced at the sky answer again. No. Something about TRM feels guided. Guided by what? Yelena asked. He hesitated. He didn't want to sound irrational not yet. I don't know, he admitted. But I think others out there didn't just witness the crash. IT interested with it. Yelena's eyes narrowed. Animals. Maybe. Jason looked out the window at the swirling snow. But if animals were involved there, their behavior doesn't match anything we understand. A faint unease settled in the air between them. Yelena finally nodded. Then Yelena. The ice keeps its secrets well but not forever. Jason exhaled, long and slow. Chapter 1 was detecting the plane, he said. Chapter 2 is understanding what's been guarding it. Outside, the Arctic wind roared like a warning. As if the land itself sensed that outsiders were preparing to uncover something it had protected for 40 long years. 7 days later, the convoy rolled out from Anchorage down, engines rumbling beneath a pale sky that held no warmth. The sun struggled to rise above the horizon, casting long shadows across the frozen wilderness as if the land were reluctant to welcome the team. Jason rode in the lead vehicle beside Tom Harrison, whose aces scanned the terrain with the practiced caution of a man who had spent decades battling the Arctic's hostility. Behind the arm stretched an armada of heavily modified transport carriers, thermal drilling rigs, mobile labs, full tanks, food SRPLIs, and insulated living quarters designed to withstand brutal temperatures. 30 specialists traveled in silence, each absorbed in the gravity of the mission. The deeper they ventured, the more the world seemed to shrink into shades of white and blue. The wind carried a low, continuous howl that seeped through even the thickest insulation. Ice betrayed no footprint, no history, only endless emptiness. Near midi, Yelena, riding in the second vehicle, suddenly lifted her head. Her voice crackled over the radio. Stop the convoy. Tom braked instantly, snow spraying around the tires. Jason turned toward her vehicle in confusion, but Yelena was already stepping out, boots sinking into the powdery surface. She knelt, gloved fingers brushing across what looked like an ordinary patch of snow. This trajectory is wrong, she murmured. Jason joined her. It looks normal to me. Surface distortion, she said. It's too smooth. Snow doesn't settle this way unless something underneath has collapsed. Tom walked over and jabbed a metal probe into the ground. It sank nearly 3 feet before striking open air. A hidden ice cavity. One wrong step, and an entire vehicle would have plunged into a crevice wide enough to swallow a hole. Yelena exhaled sharply. Something keeps other animals away from these pockets. The land is warning as if you're willing to listen. Jason stared at her. How did you see it? She gave a faint smile. Years in the field teach you to read what the wilderness doesn't want you to mistake. The convoy adjusted its path, moving with renewed caution. Hours later they reached a flat stretch of ice where horizon and sky blended seamlessly. The GPS confirmed the location, 1 kilometer from the anomaly. Camp construction began immediately. Steel frames of the base tents groaned under the wind as they were anchored deep into the ice. A towering mast for communication signals was erected, its blinking red light swallowed by the storm heavy air. Floodlights beat the area in harsh white beams, illuminating the silent expanse. It was during this flurry of activity that Sarah noticed movement at the edge of the floodlights. Jason, she whispered, pointing. Looked her. A shape stood still to still. At first, Jason thought it was a piece of rock. But then it moved. A slick form with two of the earth and a powerful stance. A bobcat. Larger than any he had seen in recorded stories. It didn't retreat. It didn't attack. It simply watched. Yelena approached slowly, her breath fogging in the cold. She's not afraid, she murmured. That's unusual. The bobcat pissed in a white arc around the far edge of the camp. Behind her, two younger cats followed precisely in her footsteps, never straying, never hesitating. Their movement was purposeful, almost ritualistic. Jason felt a quiet shiver crawl up his spine. Are they mapping the area? Sarah asked. Yelena's gaze sharpened. No. They already know it. The mother bobcat paused, as glowing ember in the floodlights. For a moment, the wilderness felt her life were watching back. Then, as silently as she had appeared, she vanished into the drifting snow, her corpse following her in perfect synchrony. Tom exhaled. That's not normal animal behavior. Yelena's voice was barely a whisper. No. It's something else. Yashin says drifted toward the direction of the anomaly. The plane had been buried for 40 years. But something had been waiting for them. Something that knew they were coming. By the third morning, the camp prison brought a small, fortified outpost carved into the endless Arctic emptiness. Thick cables snaked across the ice, powering heaters, floodlights, and the humming mobile laboratory where Sarah and the engineering team prepared the ground-penetrating radar. Frost clung to every surface like a second skin, and the air carried a brittle stillness one that made every breath feel borrowed. At 6:40 minutes, the radar screens flickered to life, revealing a three-dimensional image of the anomaly buried beneath the air. The outlines sharpened, fuselage, wings, tail section. The aircraft rested at a and girl, its metal skin fused with decades of layered ice. Jason stared at the monitor, hardly blinking. This is AT, he whispered. AE-17 is right under our feet. Tom let out a sigh exerly. 40 years frozen in silence, until now. Yelena didn't look at the radar. She stood near the open tent flap, scanning the horizon. The cats are close, she said quietly. Here is circling again. Jason frowned. How many? Same three. Always the same treat. Her voice held an unease she didn't bother to hide. But the mission couldn't wait. By noon, the thermal drilling unit roared beside the marked excavation city. Steam rose into the frigate air as the drill melted through ancient layers of ice, releasing crackling sounds that echoed like distant whispers. The team moved with precision, measuring, decrementing, keeping the temperature stable to avoid shattering the frozen structure below. 6 hours later, the drill struck metal. The sound was hollow like knocking on a coffin. A tense silence settled over the team. Sarah brushed through the steaming ice with gloved hands, revealing the faded brilliant heat paint of the aircraft's body. The letters AE-17 etched themselves into view. Yashin's throat tightened. You've made contact. The team began carving a controlled opening around the fuselage. Each centimeter felt secret. The frozen metal groaned as if waking from a long sleep. As they worked, Yelena stood several meters away, her eyes fixed on a reach of snow beyond the lights. She's back, she said softly. Jason turned. The mother bobcat stood on the ridge, her silhouette stark against the pale sky. Beside her, the two younger cats mirrored her stillness. They were watching the excavation. Not the camp. Not the people. The plane. What does she want? Sarah murmured. Yelena shook her head slowly. Not what. Who to? Before Jason could respond, a sharp crack sliced through the air, the sound of ice shifting violently beneath the air. The drilling team froze. Tom dove forward. Everyone back. Now. 18 fissure raced across the excavation city like a lightning bolt, splitting through the layers of weakened ice. The ground trembled. For a moment, Jason felt the terrifying sensation of the earth giving way beneath each his boots. Then silence. No collapse. No crevasse. Just a warning. A warning the bobcats had felt long before the humans. Yelena stepped closer to the ridge, calling out to the animals in a calm voice. Thank you, she whispered, though she doubted they understood language, yet some part of her felt they understood everything else. The mother bobcat blinked once, slowly, as if acknowledging the gratitude. Tjänsteternt and peditru inte ze sno, hor kops förläng vis uncanny precision. When the team finally resumed work, the mood had shifted. Every sound felt louder, every step more deliberate. The ice no longer felt like a barrier, felt alive, raw, almost reactive. As the daylight faded into a colorless dusk, Jason peered into the widening breach of the aircraft. The darkness inside seemed endless, holding secrets that had waited 4 decades to surface. Tomorrow, he said softly. We go inside. The Arctic wind responded with a long, mournful howl that sounded almost like a warning, or a memory refusing to stay buried. The next morning arrived in a muted, colorless haze. Down in the Arctic was less a sunrise and more a slow, reluctant surrender of darkness. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees overnight, and the camp creaked under the weight of frost that formed like scales over every surface. But no one complained. Today was the day they would enter the aircraft. Jason stood at the excavation city long before anyone else, staring at the narrow, cleared passage into the fuselage. The opening breathed out a soft plume of vapor into the cold air, like the exhalation of something long asleep. At 8 часов 15 minut, the team gathered in full thermal suits, oxygen masks, and lights clipped to their helmets. Sarah performed the final equipment checks while Tom tested the stability of the ice around the bridge. Once you're inside, Tom warned, there is no room for mistakes. The ice walls could shift if we hit the space too quickly. Jason nodded. We move slow. Determined everything. Yelena approached last, her face unreadable. The cats didn't come this morning, she murmured. Jason frowned. That's unusual. Very, Yelena replied. Have been here every day, but not today. A strong unease flickered through the group. Still, the mission had to continue. Jason lowered himself first into the narrow passage, boots crunching softly against crystallized frost. GCS headlamp caught a thin, trembling beam into the dark. Inside, the temperature felt even colder as if the planet itself rejected the intrusion of warmth. The cramped corridor opened into the passenger cabin, and time froze. Rows of seats stood in haunting silence. Frostcovered magazines lay open on trays, pages caroled like petals. Ice had formed over the overhead compartments, trapping forgotten belongings inside frozen cocoons. The flight attendant's cart remained in the aisle, coffee cups still ranged neatly, their contents solid blocks of brown ice. Sarah inhaled sharply behind him. It's like they were trapped in a single moment. Tom moved toward the cockpit, VHS light trembling over shattered instruments, frozen gears, and the captain's seat still locked in place. Impact was hard, he muttered, but controlled enough that the fuselage stayed intact. Jason approached the first row where a child's doll its young hair stiff with frost rested on an armrest as if waiting to be picked up. He swallowed tightly. Let's find the black box, he said, trying to steady VHS voice. But before anyone could respond, Sarah's light stopped on something near the emergency hit. Jason, she whispered. Look, on the inner wall, preserved under a sheet of ice, were marks vertical lines scratched into the metal. Dozens of the RM. Not made by claws. Not made by tools. Made by human fingers. Jason felt a wave of cold race through him unrelated to the temperature. Survivor markings, he said quietly. They kept track of days. Tom's voice echoed from the cockpit. I found something. They hurried toward him. Tom pointed at a small, frostbitten notebook wedged behind the captain's seat. A diary. Jason carefully pried it out. The letter cover cracked, but the pages inside remained astonishingly intact. He flipped to the first readable entry. December 25th, 1976. 22 survivors left. The cold is killing faster than the crashed. The cabin seemed to grow darker as he read further. January 5th, only 12 left. Something is living fresh kills outside the planet. Small animals, rabbits, as if offering terror to us. Yashin's breath caught. Yelena slowly lowered her headlight. She was right, she whispered. The mother bobcat, her ancestors were here too. The realization pressed down onto Aram like the weight of the ice above. The bobcats hadn't appeared by chance. They hadn't behaved oddly by coincidence. They hit a memory older than the team ever imagined. Jason turned to the final entry, dated January 11th. I am the last. But I am not alone. They watch over us. They wait. They understand. Tom whispered, "Oh my God." Before Jason could speak, a deep groan reverberated through the plane sound like shifting thunder. The ice was moving, and something outside was approaching. The team instinctively raised their lights toward the opening. A shadow passed across the entrance. Something or someone was waiting for the alarm to come out. A heavy silence gripped the interior of the aircraft as the shadow passed over the entrance. No one moved. No one breathed. Only the dull throb of shifting ice echoed through the fuselage, like the slow heartbeat of something ancient beneath their feet. Jason steadied each flashlight, its beam trembling across the frozen cabin. "Everyone stay calm," he whispered. "We hit together." Tom positioned himself near the bridge. "Whatever's out there isn't the wind. Wind doesn't move like that." Yelena tightened her grip on her thermal lamp. "If the bobcats are ranked inside the perimeter, then something else is." The groaning of the ice intensified. Tiny shards rained from the ceiling as the cold metal contracted under pressure. Jason folded the diary and slipped it inside VHS suite. "We go now," he said firmly. Slow, controlled, single filet. One by one, the team climbed out of the aircraft. The moment Jason emerged into the pale Arctic light, he felt the difference. The air itself seemed textured with a strong, watchful tension. Sarah's voice crackled beside him. Jason looked. Along the ridge to the east, barely visible against the sweeping snow, stood the mother bobcat. Her outline was still, carved into the frost like a statue of living emperor. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two more fully grown bobcats larger than the ones they had seen before stood behind her. Not cubs. Adults. Different generation. Different instincts. Jason's breath caught. "Yelena, is that normal?" Yelena stepped forward slowly. "No. Bobcats do not gather in groups like this. Not at this distance. Not to eat or purposed." The mother bobcat lowered her head, almost like a warning gesture, and turned her gaze toward the excavation city. "Something's wrong underground," Yelena murmured. "They're trying to draw our attention to the ice." Tomiska and the ground. The drill weakened more or less than expected. If the ice shifts again. Another thundercrack ripped through the air. The ground shuddered violently. A fissure shot across the excavation city, splitting open mere inches from the fuselage. Jason lunged forward. "Everyone back. Move." But before the crevice could widen, before anyone could react, the mother bobcat leaped down from the ridge and landed at the edge of the fissure, her paws tracing a precise path along the unstable ice. She paced deliberately left, right, left again, her movements forming a clear boundary. A warning. A map. A message. Yelena's eyes widened. She's marking the safe line. She's telling us where not to step to. Jason felt a tremor run through him, not from the cold, but from the realization that this behavior went far beyond instinct. "These cats," he said quietly, "have inherited knowledge tied to this place touch. Sarah saw a lot. From the survivors. From their ancestors." Yelena corrected swiftly. "Have passed down patterns by the warnings. A generational memory." As the last vibrations faded, the bobcat stepped back, watching the humans with unblinking emperor eyes. Her presence felt purposeful. "Pretty Stevie." Jason nodded toward the aircraft. "We have what we came for. The diary is Zeke. We need to return to camp and secure all data before the next shift." But just as they began to move, the mother bobcat did something none of the alarm expected. She turned her back to the alarm and began walking along a narrow, winding path across the ice. The younger cats followed with perfect precision. Yelena whispered, "She wants us to follow." Tom frowned. "To where?" Jason didn't hesitate. "To whatever heavy been guarding for 40 years. The team fell in behind the bobcats, footsteps echoing swiftly through the frozen stillness. Above the alarm, the Arctic sky darkened to a steel blue, and the wind carried a low, mournful howl. Ahead, the bobcats led the alarm deeper into the wilderness, toward a truth that had waited for decades to be uncovered. The bobcats moved ahead with silent precision, their paws gliding over the ice as though guided by memories older than the land itself. Jason, Yelena, Sarah, Tom, and the rest of the team followed in a tight formation, every step mirroring the carefully traced path laid out before the alarm. The Arctic sky gleamed into a pale, ghostly blue, and the wind dropped to iron stillness, as if the land itself were holding its breath. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, The matterbabket stopped at a broad, uneven ridge formation that has maps hitmarked as an area of unstable terrain. But as they approached, it was clear the babkets knew something the technology hadn't detected. The matterbabket leaped onto a raised patch of ice, then turned to face the team. Her gaze held an unmistakable urgency. Yelena stepped forward first. "What are you shankes?" she whispered, her breath forming a cloud in the still air. Jason knelt, brushing through the soft powder of snow from the ice. Fiche's glove frost mid-meteon. There were markings beneath the surface. Dozens of TRM. Claw marks. Patterns. PDZ etched into the ice over decades, some deep, some faint, but all connected. Sarah adjusted her light. "It's a map," she breathed. "A map of safe routes across the ice-filled touch." Tom's eyes widened. "This isn't random animal movement. This is preservation." Yelena nodded slowly. "Generational behavior. Each babket passing down knowledge. Not just instinct, but memory." Jason focused on the deepest markings wider, rougher, older. "This," he said softly, "are from the time of the crash touch." The matterbabket took a few steps backward, then set her posture regal, steady, calm. The wind began to rise, swirling round the air as if time itself had reacted. Jason reached into Vichay's coat and removed the fly attendant's dairy. The frozen letter creaked as he held it up to the fading light. "She wrote that the animals brought the food," he said. "Protected the stayed with the in their final days." Yelena added quietly, "And they remember it." A hush settled over the group. For a moment, the Arctic didn't feel empty. It felt inhabited life with the echoes of the past. Tom spoke softly, Vichay's voice thick. "My father always said the land keeps its own history." Maybe he was right too. Jason placed the dairy gently on the eyes, directly above the oldest set of claw marks. The history felt instinctively an offering of acknowledgement, of gratitude. The matterbabket rose and approached the dairy. She sniffed it gently, then touched the frozen letter with her forehead. Yelena inhaled sharply. She recognized it. Jason felt something shift inside him, an understanding, sudden and profound. "They rang just to witnesses," he whispered. "They became guardians." The wind picked up, brushing against the ridge. Snow drifted across the landscape, swirling round the team like a white veil. The matterbabket stepped back, then released a low, almost mournful sound, a sound carried across the ice like a call to the past. Her descendants responded, lifting their heads in unison. Then, as quietly as they had appeared, the babket stand and vanished into the vast, white expanse moving along the ancient PDZ wown by generations before TRM. Yelena wiped her eyes. "You never see anything like this, Argento." Jason nodded. "Some stories aren't meant to be solved there. Only unearthed." The team returned to camp in silence, each of TRM carrying a piece of the arctic truth. In the days that followed, their findings would astonish the world. Papers would be written, documentaries filmed, debates sparked across countless fields of science. But one thing would remain unchanged there. For 40 years, in the most unforgiving place on Earth, an unlikely legacy endured born from tragedy, shaped by nature, and carried forward by the silent guardians of the ice. And long after the humans left, the babkets continued their vigil, tracing the same ancient PDZ beneath the dancing aurora, keepers of a story that would forever blur the line between instinct and empathy, survival and remembrance. A truth preserved not by people, but by the world itself.